بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. We started the Fiqh of Salah last week and we will continue this week inshallah. Last week we covered what are the prayer times and we discussed in detail the technical meanings and so one of the things I didn't mention is that the calendar that we use in the masjid is Qura calendar, and Qura is based on adding an hour and a half to the Maghrib time, which in Sydney is fine. You won't have any issues. But if you go much further south, maybe you go to Tasmania or you go to the South Island, Qura will have an issue where Isha time will not be accurate. So you cannot use Qura in those kinds of extreme latitudes, but in Sydney it is not an issue. So last time we completed what are the times we can pray, and we'll start with what are the prohibited times, and then we'll go to what are the preferred times. And if we finish that, then we will talk about what are the other conditions of the prayer, ijmalan, and then we'll go tafsil inshallah. Either we'll do that today or next week, whatever we can cover inshallah. So the prohibited times in general are 5. Okay. The first is when the sun is rising. The second is zawal time, when the sun is right above the head, and we discussed what that means technically. And the third is when the sun is setting. These 3 are easy to remember. And then there are 2 additional times. One is after someone has prayed the Fajr prayer of that day. Okay, so today is Wednesday. I get so busy at work, sometimes I forget which day is what, but today is Wednesday, right? You prayed the Fajr today or Wednesday, then after you have prayed that, then you cannot pray until the sun rises. And we'll come to the exceptions to that rule. That is from the prohibited times. Similarly, the person who prays the Asr of that day. And now, what does this mean? So for example, let's say I missed Fajr last week and then I remembered, okay, I have not prayed the Fajr. So this morning, I prayed Fajr, okay, of last week. And I still have to pray the Fajr and the Sunnah of today, then I am allowed to do that. But once I have prayed today's Fajr, then there is no prayer after that. And we'll come to exceptions in a minute. Similarly, Asr, if you have prayed Asr of that day, then it will not be permitted to pray until the sun has set completely. Okay? What are the exceptions to that? So, if a person is praying the Asr prayer and the prayer he missed the Jama'ah and he's praying his own prayer, he's praying Asr, so he's accepted from that rule. We said that sunset itself is a time that is prohibited to pray. The exception is if someone has not prayed Asr of that day. Okay? He is late for Asr. Let's say Maghrib is at 5 o'clock. 4:59 he remembers, oh, okay, I haven't prayed Asr yet. The sun's about to set. And he stands up. And as he is praying, then the sun is setting at that time. That will still be valid to pray at that time. So he doesn't break his prayer because the sun is setting. He will continue praying that prayer. Now the fuqaha differ, was that prayer prayed in its time or was it prayed as qada? And it's relevant because if you prayed in the time you got the reward, and if you prayed qada, then you have simply completed the faridah but you haven't got the reward of it. The faridah was on your head and you completed it. So Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Abu Hanifa I have written H, and usually H means Abu Hanifa, but in this case actually it means Ahmad bin Hanbal. Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal require that you have completed one rak'ah for it to be considered. So if you, for example, you stood up and you prayed Asr prayer and you completed one rak'ah and then the sun set after that, then you have prayed it within its time. So if you are Shafi'i and you did not complete one whole rak'ah before the sun started to set, then you have prayed qada and not ada. That's a technical difference. The thing to remember is that as the sun is setting, you haven't prayed Asr, you will continue to pray Asr. Okay? Similarly, with the difference, in Fajr time, the Shafi'is and the others are also of the saying that if you have not prayed Fajr and you are praying Fajr and the sun is about to rise, but you have started to pray before the sun is rising, then you will continue that prayer. Imam Abu Hanifa says that if the sun starts to rise for Fajr, then the Salah is broken. Okay? If you did not realize that it was rising, because we live in houses and you're praying in houses, you don't realize the sun is rising. You finish your prayer and you looked, okay, I was 2 minutes into the sun rising, then the prayer was not valid. Then you will wait until the sun rises completely, like we discussed last week, and we discussed the technical definition, if you remember. Then the person will repeat his Fajr prayer at that time. All right? Did we understand this technical difference? Okay, so there's a difference for the Hanafis, for Maghrib and, for Asr and Fajr. For the Shafi'is, there is no difference. They will continue praying. What are the istisna of these things? We'll start with the Shafi'is because they are the most complicated in what they allow. The Hanafis are simple. They say that once you have prayed Fajr, nothing is allowed, except if someone is reading the Quran, he comes to a sajda of tilawa, then he can do that. All right. Similarly, a sajda of shukr, he can do that. The Shafi'is say that if a person missed the sunnah prayer of Fajr and he has prayed the fard prayer, usually with jama'ah, then he can make up the sunnah of the Fajr before sunrise. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal is with him in this. Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa says that that will not be allowed. He has to wait until the sun rises before he can make up the 2 rak'ah. So alhamdulillah, I lead the prayer in Fajr and I turn around, and there's regular people who always come late, who always pray the 2 sunnah after they fard. This should not be a habit. All right? It should not become a habit that a person is always late in Fajr and always praying the sunnah late. He should be praying the sunnah, coming in time, praying with the jama'ah in time. Occasionally it happens, then that's okay, but you made it a habit. You are regularly going against what is the sunnah. They allow voluntary, so Shafi'is allow voluntary prayers that have a specific reason. So for example, someone enters the masjid after he has prayed Fajr. Okay? Then he has to pray Tahiyatul Masjid, 2 rak'ah of Tahiyatul Masjid. He will be allowed to pray even if he has already prayed the Fajr prayer before sunrise. Similarly, if someone has done wudu, then there is a 2 rak'ah of wudu. So if he wants to pray that voluntary prayer, he will be allowed to do that. If he is in the haram, he can pray at any time. There are no prohibited times for him at all. If it is the day of Friday, then he can pray in the zawal of Friday as well. This is only for the Shafi'is I'm discussing. If there's a funeral prayer at that time, then he can pray at that time as well. So you can see that they have allowed a number of prayers that have specific reasons that can be prayed between Fajr and sunrise. Okay? The exception to the rule is if someone wears the ihram and he has prayed Fajr, then he cannot pray 2 rak'ah of ihram at that time. He has to wait until sunrise for that. That's the exception to the rule. What are the preferred times of the prayer? In general, The preferred times is that a person prays in the earliest opportunity. Enough time that the time has entered, he gains tahara, he does wudu, and then he prays. And the best of that is to be praying with the jama'ah. So let's say the time enters at 12 o'clock for dhuhr, and the jama'ah is being prayed at 12:30, then the fadila is to be praying at 12:30 with the jama'ah. Not that he prays by himself at 5 minutes past 12. That will not be preferred. So the jama'ah will always be preferred over everything else. What times should the jama'ah be done? In places like Sydney, it should always be done at the earliest time. Enough time to give the adhan, to pray sunnah, to do wudu, for people to come to the masjid. If you are in hot climates, and the Prophet ﷺ used to say that for the dhuhr prayer, pray it after the dhahira, meaning after when the sun is very hot, it has cooled down a bit, then you pray. So some say that this is 3/4 of an hour or later than that, if you're in a hot climate. So in Sydney, if you have a heat wave, it's very valid to be praying dhuhr late until it cools down. Asr is in its earliest time, except for the Hanafis. As I said, the Hanafis prefer that it is prayed with the 2 shadow length rather than the 1 shadow length. Maghrib is at its earliest time for all the fuqaha. Isha at its earliest time except for the Hanafis. The Hanafis say the preferred time is close to when 1/3 of the night is being passed. So if you go to, I don't go to all parts of Pakistan, but I go to Karachi. And in Karachi, if you go to the Jami' Masjid where the Mufti leads, and Isha enters at 7:30, he will be praying at 9:30, which is challenging, but that's what they do to be preferring to pray Isha later. Fajr again at its earliest time, except for the Hanafis. Hanafis are difficult to remember. They say that the Fajr should be prayed when there is starting to get some light outside. Okay? So something like 30 to 40 minutes before the end of time. So in this masjid we pray at its earliest time, but the Hanafis prefer that it is prayed a bit later than that. Except for the women. They are instructed to pray when it's dark. Our problem with our women is that they wait for us to come back from the masjid, and then we wake them up and then they pray. Okay? The usul should be that they should be praying at its earliest time, and that's something we should try and do in our households. Having said all of that, the best preferred time is with the jama'ah. Whatever is the jama'ah in the masjid of your locality, so you all come here to pray, whatever time we are praying is the preferred time. Any questions on the prayer times? All clear? Yes?
If someone is 6:05, someone prays at, starts praying at 6 o'clock.
The prayer time starts at 6 o'clock? Sunrise is at 6:05, and he starts praying at 6 o'clock. Then he should pray a 2 rak'ah that is quick. He doesn't start with alif lam mim dhalika al-kitabu la rayba fihi. Alright, he does a quick prayer, meeting all the fara'id of the prayer, trying to finish before the sun will rise.
Chef, Hanafis, the Asr is not the preferred time, but that's the time when the waqt starts for them, right?
No. You weren't here last week. There are 2 opinions in the Hanafi school. The mu'tamad. Do you guys know, I keep saying mu'tamad. You know what mu'tamad means? You've all been quiet, doesn't know what mu'tamad means. Mu'tamad means the most correct view in the school. The one that is relied upon, that is what the fatwa is given on. Okay? So the mu'tamad of the Hanafi school is 2 shadow lengths, which is the later time. There is a secondary opinion that allows to be prayed at the first shadow length that connects with everyone else, the Shafi'is, the Hanafis, so the Hanbalis and the Malikis. Right? Within those people who say that the time enters at the 2 shadow lengths, there is from riwayat from the Imam that he says that Asr ends at 1 shadow length. So Dhuhr ends at 1 shadow length and Asr starts at 2 shadow lengths. So in between this time there is no Faridah prayer. And there is another opinion that Dhuhr ends at the 2 shadow lengths and Asr starts with the 2 shadow lengths, so there is no gap. So our books, the Hanafi books, say that it is preferred that a person prays the dhuhr before one shadow length, so he doesn't pray it late after it's one shadow length, and he prays the asr after two shadow lengths. That's what's preferred, and the mu'tamad of the school.
Can it be still valid?
What do you mean by that?
Apart from what the preferred.
What does it mean?
If someone prays the dhuhr,
Yes.
say for the 4 o'clock, the asr time starts for Hanafi.
Yes.
Someone prays at 3:55.
Okay.
Dhuhr.
Let's say someone is following this. He needs to be consistent whatever he is doing. Okay. If he is following the opinion that his dhuhr ends at two shadow lengths, that's what it ends at. Okay. Then he's allowed to pray, and it will be valid for him. One day he prays asr at one shadow length, and the next day he says that no, dhuhr finishes at the two shadow length because I'm running late. He is, in Urdu we say he's making a khichdi of his deen. You know what khichdi is? It's a mixture of different things. You just put lentils and rice and spices and you just mix it all, and it becomes a mess. So he needs to be consistent whatever he's following. Well, you are Shafi'i, you will follow the Shafi'i madhab. Shafi'is have one opinion with asr. You had a question? No. Any other questions about this? As I said last week, the Malikis and the Shafi'is have a lot more delineation. So the Malikis have ikhtiyari waqt and ittirari waqt. You can revise that from last week. And the Shafi'is have 8 different classifications. So someone who wants to study that in depth will go and study that in a separate class. The conditions of the prayer, I will list them and then we will start going through them in detail one by one. So you can take notes about this. Number 1 is Islam. Okay, that a person should be a Muslim. Number 2 is that he has reached the age of bulugha. Okay? Sorry, bulugha is puberty. Puberty. Number 3 is that he has tahara, and we have spent the last 3 months doing that, so there's no need to repeat it. What number did I get to? Number 4 is dukhulul waqt, entry of the time. So if Fajr was at 6 o'clock and you prayed at 5:55, the prayer is not valid. We'll come to exceptions with travel and rain and Arafat and Muzdalifah. We will come to that. Not today, in another class, inshallah. Covering the awrah, facing the qibla. For the Hanbalis and the Hanafis, the intention is a condition and is a rukn for the others. And we have already explained the difference between condition and rukn. You'll remember that. Removal of najasa from the body, from the clothes and the place. Islam is easy. Allah has made the prayer wajib on everyone. But if a kafir prays, it's not sahih. He won't be rewarded for it. So in actual fact, you can say from a technical perspective, it's wajib on everyone, but technically only for Muslims. This means that if someone was a kafir before and he enters into Islam, he does not need to make up the last 50 years of prayers because he was not mukallaf at that stage. As opposed to someone who was a Muslim, he became a murtad and then he came back. He has to make up those prayers. The bulugha is easy. I have taught you this in the tafsir class. What is the definition of bulugha for boys? Breaking voice? No.
Wet dream.
The wet dream, okay. Wet dream for everyone. Or he reaches the age of 51 if he hasn't had 15. Brain is tired today. 15 lunar calendar, not solar calendar, okay. And the girls is menstruation.
What's 15 in
14 and a half in solar,
14 and a half?
approximately. So the Prophet ﷺ said, instruct your children to pray at the age of 7 and hit them after the age of 10 if they do not pray. Why is this? Because it requires practice to have in your life 5 daily prayers. The child is got into that habit from that age, then when he becomes baligh, he already has the habit and he will continuously pray. Otherwise, if they don't have that, they will forget, they will sleep through the prayers, they will not know how to prioritize the prayer at work, at school, doing travel, doing all kinds of things. Here it is necessary to mention how strict the fuqaha were about this matter. That Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal said that a person who leaves the prayers becomes a kafir. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah was even more strict on this, in that he mentioned that a person who leaves the prayers, if he dies on this, then he is not buried with the Muslims, he does not have a janazah done on him, and his body is thrown in the jungle or something like that. So he was very, very strict on this matter. Imam Shafi'i was of the opinion that a person who denies the faridah of the prayer becomes a kafir. Otherwise, he does not become a kafir, and the Islamic State will execute him for being negligent of his prayers. That's how strict he was. Imam Abu Hanifa would jail the person, possibly even indefinitely if he does not do tawbah. So the prayer is something that the fuqaha saw as very strict. And you know that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did jihad on zakat, and he would have done jihad on salah as well, if that was required. So the prayer is a strict faridah. We will do entry of time. We don't need to cover that again. We have done that. Covering of the awrah, let's do that today, and then we'll stop at that. What time is it? Do I have time? 8 o'clock. Okay, let's do this very briefly, and we'll continue next week, inshallah. In brief, the awrah for men is from the navel to the knees. The fuqaha disagreed on whether they include them or not. Okay? So, all of them say the navel is not included. Do you know what is the navel? The belly button. Good, alhamdulillah. I have to check. So the navel is not included. The difference of opinion is whether the knee is included or not. Okay? Imam Shafi'i says, and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and Imam Malik say that the knee is not included. So it is up to the knee. The entire knee itself does not need to be included. They say that it is better to be included because of the possibility that the awrah can be exposed if it is not included, the knee, doing the actions of the prayer. So how does this happen? So you find different kinds of shorts. So one of the popular shorts right now is just right above the knee. It's very annoying. You want to buy them, but they don't cover the knee. And they're cheap, so you're like, man, I wish I could buy that. And the problem with them is usually they're wide as well. So when you sit down for sujood, it comes up and exposes the awrah. So it is better that a person covers the knee so that when he sits down in sujood, that knee is still covered when he is in sujood or sitting down. I'll come to your question when I finish, inshallah. Okay? For the woman, the famous ikhtilaf is that Imam Shafi'i and Imam Malik say that everything has to be covered except the face and the hands. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbali is even more strict, and he says only the face can be uncovered. Everything else has to be covered. So you'll see the Hanbali women, they will have gloves on and socks on when they are praying. The Hanafis are the most lenient. They say that the feet, only the feet, not the legs, the feet, the hands, the face can be uncovered when the woman is praying. Everyone agrees that if someone intentionally leaves the awrah exposed during the prayer is not valid. Everyone agrees on this. There are exceptions, as we discussed in the section on tahara. Okay? If someone's awrah becomes temporarily exposed, then what they say is that if it is a short time, I'm just doing this in very brief, you can go into a lot more detail, and they all have their difference on what they consider as short. If it is a short time and he covers himself, then the prayer will be valid. What we see in our times is that the young men go to the gym, wear an extremely tight, short shirt, and then they have baggy, loose pants that is just at the hips. And when they go into ruku', then the backside is exposed. And if that lasts for the entire ruku', then that prayer will be invalid. Okay? We will stop here, inshallah. I can see you all have questions. His hand was raised first.
The duration of one tasbih?
Okay, so 3 tasbihah is what I read, but you can correct me if the Shafi'i madhab is different to that.
Shafi'i, there's not the only excuse you have is if the wind blows.
The wind blows it.
That's the excuse, and you have to straight away cover it.
Straight away cover it. There's no time period. Yeah, yeah. The Malikis are similar. They say that if the wind blows and uncovers the clothing, then the person immediately covers that area. This thing requires care because the awrah needs to be covered. And you have to remember that when you're doing ruku'ah, your backside is exposed. There's a whole saf behind you that's looking at your backside, right? So you're just ruining their prayer because it's not valid for anyone to look at the awrah of anyone else. So, you are exposing them to a sin, and you should avoid doing that. You had a question?
But somebody who is looking at unintentionally, somebody in front of him is being exposed. We are looking at him. Is my prayer valid?
Your prayer is valid, but your eyes, like if you saw that, for everything the first look is allowed. You had no control over that. Okay. After that, you move your eyes away from that. You should be looking towards the place of sajda. Yeah.
Two questions. The minimum length of the shorts, when you say starts from the knee, it's just like for the prayers or even in the normal routine life?
Or even in the normal routine life. The awrah is the awrah. We emphasize it in the prayer, but even in the normal routine life that a person needs to cover the knee at all times. The exception being, with the wife, etc. And obviously when he is doing his hajj or he's taking a shower or something like that. Yeah.
The second thing is for the ihram, this navel, it should be above the navel?
As I said, no one says the navel needs to be included. Okay? So it is up to the navel, to the waist, but the navel itself does not need to be included. And that's a line across to the back.
Just the praying prohibition. Some people when there's now the Maghrib Adhan is being called, and they come and do Atahiyatul Masjid.
Yep.
Can they do it?
In the Shafi'i madhab, that's allowed.
The Shafi'i.
Yes.
And
The Ahnaf say there should not be any sunnah between the adhan and iqama of Maghrib. With the exception being that if you come to a masjid like this that leaves a 7-minute gap, you can pray a 2 sunnah prayer, two nafil prayer.
before the sunset, even the sun, there's 1 minute left, or half.
Yeah, the Shafi'is allowed it, right? Because I said to you, if they are praying a voluntary prayer that has a specific reason, okay, the Hanafis strictly not allowed. You come and sit down. Even doesn't allow it. Yes. The Malikis and Hanafis agree on this point.
For the women,
Sorry.
For the women, the face and hand is Shafi and Hanbali, or Shafi and Maliki?
Hanbali are the strictest. They say face only. Okay. Malikis and Shafi'is, face and hands. Hanafis are feet, hands, and face. Someone else had their hand raised on this side? No? Okay. Yes.
So the aura is just from goes on top of the kneecap, should be covered.
They didn't give anatomical descriptions in the books, to be honest. But as I understood it, is it up to the knee? Does not necessarily need to include the knee. Now, the kneecap is something that moves, right? So if you want to take the knee up to here, that's what I would say. Everyone's studying their anatomy now. Well, one last question, inshallah, then we'll stop. Did you have a question, Ali? No, you're just scratching your nose. And one last question? Any last questions? Okay, we'll stop here.
Sajda?
Sorry?
One for sajda, for voluntary,
Sajda of recitation,
is that
yes.
allowed?
Yes, is allowed.
Sajda shukr.
Yes.
Can we do it in prohibited time?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Okay, if you can stop that freeze, Jazakallah khair. Anyone has any questions?